Welcome to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. We are walking through a case today that, for well over 4 decades, has really just unsettled the community of Newburgh Heights, Ohio. And it's because it contains this chronological riddle that's so profound, it almost seems to defy the basic rules of time, of forensic science.
It really does.
This is the 1981 vanishing of 17-year-old Kurt Sova.
It is, without a doubt, one of the most perplexing cases to ever come out of the Midwest. And here's the central conflict, the thing that haunts you. You've got a high school student. He vanishes from a small party, a local party on a Friday night in October.
Yep.
5 days later, his body is found. And it's found just 500 yards away in a ravine. Now, logically, your first thought is, okay, he succumbed to the elements.
He wandered off, got lost, and a tragedy occurred. Simple, sad, but understandable.
Exactly. But that is precisely where the logic just completely breaks down.
Because the medical evidence provided a timeline that absolutely fundamentally refuted that idea of accidental exposure. It suggests he couldn't have been outdoors or even deceased in that ravine for all 5 of those days.
Yeah, you're real close.
So you have this bizarre paradox. You get immediate physical proximity. I mean, so close to where he vanished. But then you have a forensic timeline that suggests he was alive, or at the very least, held somewhere in a controlled environment. Somewhere else. For maybe 4 days before his body was placed at that discovery site.
Which creates a unique, almost impossible challenge for investigators. It just sets this mood that something deeply wrong and frankly, highly organized happened here. We're not looking at a simple tragedy. We're forced to examine a really complex cover-up.
Right.
So the question isn't just what happened to Kurt, but the more difficult logistical question of where. Where did he spend those 120 hours between Friday night and, say, Tuesday afternoon?
Our mission today is to really unpack that chronology. We're going to examine the bizarre, contradictory evidence and some of the incredibly unsettling witness reports that the family had to deal with during the search. And we'll break down the theories that try to fill in that 5-day gap.
Yeah, let's try and make sense of the forensic impossibility of the Kurt Sova case.
So let's start by setting the scene. It's Newburgh Heights, Ohio, fall of 1981. This is a pretty typical working-class suburb of Cleveland. And Kurt Sova, by all accounts, was a typical, responsible 17-year-old high school kid.
Nothing to suggest he was involved in anything dangerous, just a normal teenager.
Exactly. And on the evening of October 23rd, 1981, that's a Friday, he leaves his home to attend an unplanned, a spur-of-the-moment party at a duplex nearby with a friend.
And the details of this party are absolutely pivotal because this is the last time anyone can reliably say they saw him. According to the other guests, Kurt, who was not really known as a heavy drinker, he was consuming some really high-proof grain alcohol. Everclear, specifically. Yeah. And so he very quickly became heavily intoxicated. I mean, way beyond what he was used to.
And the situation seems to have deteriorated pretty rapidly once his condition got worse.
It did. The sequence of events leading up to his disappearance, well, it's only known through the testimony of the party attendees. And frankly, we should view all of that with a heavy dose of skepticism, given what happens next.
Of course.
The last confirmed sighting is detailed by a friend. This friend claimed that when Kurt got sick, he took him outside the duplex.
For some fresh air, presumably.
Right, for fresh air. The friend then supposedly went back inside just for a moment to grab Kurt's jacket. When the friend returned, moments later, Kurt was gone.
Just vanished. In that tiny window of time it takes to grab a jacket.
That's the story. And that is where the chain of reliable testimony just completely ends, and the official timeline breaks. But what makes this so immediately suspicious, what alerted the family that something was deeply wrong, is what happened the very next day. Saturday. Kurt doesn't come home.
And his parents start making calls.
They do, and their interactions with the party host, they just cemented this awful feeling. Kurt's mother, Dorothy Sova, she called the host, a young woman named Debbie Sams. She commits this immediate, really aggressive deception.
She lies.
Flat out. She initially denied throwing a party at all. Denied seeing Kurt whatsoever.
Wow. That initial deception is so key, isn't it? It just provides the immediate context for everything that follows. It suggests either premeditation or just intense, blinding panic.
It does. And she only admitted that the party even happened and confirmed Kurt was there when the Sova family basically cornered her with irrefutable proof.
What was the proof?
They managed to track down a pizza delivery driver who confirmed he'd made a delivery to the duplex that Friday night. The lie just completely collapsed right there.
I mean, that kind of initial denial, especially when a kid is missing,
Yeah.
it just poisons the well of witness testimony completely.
Mhm.
If the host is lying about the core event, the police, and of course the family, they're forced to question every single subsequent detail that comes from anyone at that party.
Absolutely. It suggests there was an instant agreement to conceal the event, which just raises the stakes on what else they might be concealing about Kurt's actual disappearance.
So now we have the family. They're in this awful position. Their son is missing, and the last people to see him have already lied to their faces. And during the 5 days they searched for him, they were subjected to some truly, truly unsettling and ominous interactions.
The weirdness factor in this search phase is just extremely high. I mean, off the charts.
Let's start with the mysterious man.
Right. So first, there was this interaction the parents had while they were out searching in the neighborhood. A man, a total stranger, approaches them, and he warns them, ominously, that they would never see your son again.
That is not a vague comment. That's a direct, targeted threat. Or a prediction. It immediately feeds into these theories of, targeted harm or some kind of organized stranger intervention.
It does. And if you try to rationalize that, maybe it was just some cruel person in the neighborhood. Well, the specificity of other details during the search, it pushes you further into the realm of an orchestrated crime.
Like the sighting at the record store.
Exactly. There was this unverified sighting that became part of the local lore. A boy, strongly resembling Kurt, maybe it was Kurt, was reportedly seen at a local record store several days after he vanished. Maybe Sunday or Monday.
And even if that was just a case of misidentification, which is possible,
Of course.
it just added to this immense confusion. And it extended the possibility, at least in the family's mind, that Kurt was still alive, he was mobile, days after that party.
But the most chilling detail, the one that points most directly to some kind of external orchestration, that's the anonymous call, the one the Sova family received 2 days before Kurt's body was discovered.
Tell us about that call, because it really suggests someone was planning the conclusion to this whole thing.
That's exactly right. This mysterious stranger, a man, calls the Sova residence, and he accurately predicts that Kurt's body would be found soon.
I mean, the implication there is just undeniable. Someone knew the exact timeline of the concealment, and they knew about the impending placement of the body in that ravine. They're either the perpetrator themselves or someone so intimately involved in the cover-up that they decided to issue this terrifying warning.
It's monumental evidence of calculated action. But speaking of the timeline, there's another crucial conflicting report. And this one suggests Kurt was functional, outside the party house, long after Friday night.
The unconfirmed classmate sighting on Monday, 3 full days after the party.
This specific detail is a monumental hurdle for any simple accident theory. A classmate reportedly saw Kurt Sova alive walking near his own home on Monday afternoon.
And this wasn't just a fleeting glimpse.
No. This person claimed that Kurt actually called out to the classmate by name, which would indicate lucidity, recognition. And crucially, the classmate didn't suspect anything was wrong at the time because they didn't know yet that Kurt had been reported missing to the general public.
So let's just pause for a second and absorb that chronological knot. We have a responsible kid who gets very sick at a party. The host lies about the entire evening. During the search, his parents get these specific threatening warnings. And most confusingly, we have a concrete report from someone who knew him that Kurt was still alive, walking, and functioning on Monday.
I mean, if that Monday sighting is true, it just completely obliterates the narrative that Kurt wandered off intoxicated on Friday and died from exposure. It forces us to accept that he was either wandering around normally or had been released or was somehow held but alive for those first 3 days.
This is the crucial context, and it directly sets up the medical paradox that we have to analyze now.
Here is where the mystery truly solidifies. It moves from a simple missing person case into this impossible forensic riddle. On Wednesday, October 28th, 5 days after he vanished, the search for Kurt came to an end.
His body was discovered by 3 boys who were just walking through a ravine on Harvard Street.
And the location is incredibly significant. It was only about 500 yards, think maybe 5 football fields from the party house. They found him lying near a small puddle of water, which, as we'll get into, may have been part of an attempt to stage the scene.
suggesting he was overcome near the water or tried to get a drink.
Something like that. But this is the moment where we get the most powerful testimony against the idea that the body had been there since Friday.
From Kurt's own father.
Yes. Kurt's father, Ken Sova, stated emphatically, publicly, that he had personally searched that exact same ravine area, including that specific path. He searched it on Monday, and he did not find his son's body.
That is just critical to the whole investigative theory. If his father is accurate, and there's absolutely no reason to doubt the desperate search efforts of a parent, then the body must have been placed in that ravine sometime between Monday evening, after the father searched, and Wednesday morning, when the boys found him.
It's the foundational proof. It's the proof that the body was moved and that the crime scene was staged.
Let's talk about the physical evidence they found at the scene, beyond just the location. Kurt was found barefoot.
Yes. His left shoe was located nearby. It was wedged in a pile of rocks, which suggests it was thrown there or placed there deliberately. But his right shoe
Was never recovered.
never, to this day. And beyond that strange detail with the footwear, the body itself only had minor scrapes and bruises.
And the fact that there were only minor injuries that led the coroner to rule out assault as the direct cause of death, right? He wasn't killed by blunt force trauma or any obvious external violence.
Correct. And this brings us to the most critical, the most contradictory piece of evidence in the entire case, the medical examiner's forensic finding.
This finding, even decades later, is the single reason this case cannot be closed.
Precisely. The medical examiner determined, based on the level of decomposition and other postmortem changes, that Kurt Sova had only been deceased for a window of 24 to 36 hours when he was found.
Okay, let's really think about the scale of that conflict. He'd been missing for 5 days. That's 120 hours. But forensically, he'd only been dead for about a day and a half.
It's a massive contradiction.
So the body looked like he died, late Tuesday or early Wednesday morning, despite having vanished Friday night? I mean, if he had been exposed in that ravine since Friday, wouldn't the cold October weather in Ohio, even without heavy rain, have led to really significant, unmistakable signs of decomposition?
Oh, absolutely. Even in late October, the daily temperature fluctuations, the moisture, the natural processes of decay, they would have left very distinct forensic markers after 120 hours. Minimal decomposition, as ruled by the ME, it strongly suggests Kurt was alive, or at the very least, kept in a temperature-controlled, hidden environment.
Like a basement.
A basement, a garage, maybe an abandoned building that was somewhat warm and dry. For those first 4 days, the physical evidence just screams concealment and storage.
Let's delve a bit further into the medical ruling on the cause of death itself. It was ruled instantaneous physiological death, or simply undetermined.
Right.
And you mentioned he had a minor alcohol level remaining. Can you explain the significance of that?
Certainly. When the autopsy was performed, they tested for substances. They found he had a remaining blood alcohol content, a BAC, of 0.11%. Now, for our listeners, 0.11% is intoxicated, yes, but it is explicitly not a fatal level for an otherwise healthy 17-year-old.
And the medical examiner confirmed that.
Confirmed it. The BAC was explicitly ruled as not enough to kill him. And given that he was found 5 days later, that low level of alcohol suggests that whatever he consumed on Friday night had largely been metabolized by the time he died on Tuesday.
Which, again, it just completely undermines that simple theory of accidental death from acute alcohol poisoning in the ravine on Friday night.
It completely disproves that narrative. And furthermore, the ruling of instantaneous physiological death, that means they found no clear physical reason for death, no trauma, no overwhelming intoxication, no obvious disease. This ruling is often reserved for things like sudden metabolic events, maybe an acute non-traumatic poisoning that doesn't leave clear markers, or perhaps a sudden cardiac event triggered by neglect, stress, or some combination of factors while he was being held somewhere.
It leaves a massive forensic hole in the story.
A huge one.
So the bottom line is, the medical evidence forces investigators to pursue this highly complex scenario. He survives the party, he's concealed alive somewhere, he dies suddenly and non-violently indoors sometime late on Tuesday, and is then transported 500 yards and placed in the ravine to look like an accidental exposure victim.
It's the unavoidable conclusion if you trust the forensic evidence. And we have to know, as we move on here, that the initial investigation itself was seriously flawed. The Newburgh Heights police chief, John Ajoy, he later admitted that the 1981 investigation was, quote, not handled well, by the department at the time.
And what does not handled well specifically entail in a case like this?
Well, typically it means a failure to properly secure the scene, poor evidence collection, and most critically, inadequate witness management. In 1981, they likely didn't isolate the party guests immediately or press hard enough on the inconsistencies. They allowed that host's initial lie and the subsequent vague testimonies to just sort of solidify into this hard-to-crack wall of silence.
The poor initial handling allowed the opportunity for a staged discovery to go unchallenged for decades.
It did. And this lack of clarity, compounded by the dramatic and contradictory evidence, is precisely why, 4 decades later, this case just grips the public and fuels all this intense internet speculation.
Because the established facts, the timeline, the location, the medical paradox, they just don't connect to any plausible natural conclusion. So let's explore the theories that have flourished online, trying to fill that 5-day gap.
The most prominent theory, and it's the one that's most scientifically sound because it's based on the medical examiner's time of death finding, is the held indoors and staged discovery theory.
Which basically means someone actively kidnapped or restrained Kurt, kept him somewhere, and then moved his body after he died.
Exactly. The lack of decomposition despite the cold October weather, that's the foundation. It demands a warm, hidden location, that basement, that garage, a storage unit, some abandoned building with minimal air circulation. This implies intent. Someone made a deliberate decision to conceal the body or conceal Kurt himself for several days.
And this theory has to confront the immense logistical challenge of staging that discovery. Someone had to move a body, a teenage body is heavy, 500 yards, presumably under the cover of darkness on a Tuesday night.
A huge risk.
A huge risk. They place him near a puddle, and they intentionally place his left shoe nearby, but keep or lose the right one.
Yeah.
What does that missing shoe suggest to you about the staging?
Well, it could suggest carelessness, haste, or perhaps it was an intentional detail. Something to imply he lost his footing or struggled near that rock pile where the left shoe was found. But staging a scene 500 yards from the party, in a location the father had already searched, that suggests a strange blend of calculation and urgency.
How so?
They wanted it to look like he wandered off and died quickly, even though the body's condition proved otherwise. This theory implies one or more individuals who are highly motivated to deflect suspicion from themselves or from that controlled environment where Kurt was held.
Which brings us to our second major theory, and this one connects directly back to the initial inconsistent testimony and that web of lies, the party concealment or cover-up theory.
Right. This is the view that the truth resides entirely within that duplex. That someone at that party, likely the host, Debbie Sams, or the friend who last saw him, they knew far more than they ever disclosed. The initial lie about the party and the vague accounts of him just leaving are cited as the foundation of this cover-up.
The speculation here usually goes down 2 paths. Path 1. An accidental death occurred immediately. A bad fall while he was intoxicated, or maybe the excessive alcohol caused some sudden medical event, and the young guests just panicked and concealed him.
Right.
Path 2. He was harmed, maybe unintentionally during a fight or an argument, and they moved him. But both of these paths require a major logistical leap of faith.
They do, because if they concealed him immediately after death on Friday, they had to conceal the body in a way that preserved it for 4 days, which, again, it points to a controlled indoor environment, perhaps the basement of the duplex itself.
That's a chilling thought.
It is. This theory works even better if we assume they concealed a still living but very sick Kurt, who then died later in their care, maybe from neglect or a subsequent event. And that would explain the late time of death. The Monday sighting, if true, makes the scenario even more plausible. If he was alive but restrained and recovering on Monday, only to die on Tuesday.
But how do we reconcile the sheer audacity of hiding a person or a body for 4 days with the profile of panicked high school students? Doesn't the professionalism implied by the staging and that specific forensic outcome suggest a calmer, more calculated mind at work?
And that is where the third theory comes into play. This one is fueled by those unsettling external interactions the family experienced, the stranger intervention and targeted harm theory. This suggests the partygoers were not the only people involved, and perhaps not even the primary perpetrators.
This takes the focus off the immediate party guests and looks at the reports of that mysterious stranger who warned the parents.
You'll never see your son again.
And most powerfully, that anonymous phone call predicting the discovery.
These facts suggest involvement from unknown external individuals, potentially adult individuals who are highly organized. I mean, that anonymous caller having specific knowledge about the timing of the body's placement is almost irrefutable proof of orchestration.
It implies a targeted act.
It implies a targeted act of harm, or that someone external to the party scene was either holding Kurt or maybe assisting the partygoers in the subsequent cover-up. It transitions the case from a high school party tragedy into a far more sinister, calculated crime involving some criminal expertise in concealment and misdirection.
Even if the party guests were somehow responsible for the initial trauma or death, the subsequent staging and that anonymous call, it points to a third party, a knowledgeable mastermind or at least experienced external assistance in executing the cover-up and the final placement of the body.
Yes, they were actively managing the end of the narrative.
We should probably briefly cover the less central theories as they do pop up online. The first is the simple misidentification theory.
Yeah, that largely relates to the record store sighting and similar unverified sightings during the search. And while it adds to the eerie confusion, it may have just been a mistake, a simple resemblance to Kurt. However, in a case with so few solid facts, every little detail takes on this outsized importance.
And if it was Kurt lucidly walking around on a Monday, it just further proves the concealment theory.
Exactly, regardless of whether the concealers were the party guests or strangers.
And finally, the simple accident and panic theory, which suggests a sudden medical incident right there in the immediate area.
And while panic is incredibly plausible, especially amongst teenagers dealing with Everclear, the timeline is its Achilles heel. As we've established, the ME said the death was late Tuesday or Wednesday. Anyone who panicked and moved the body must have done so 5 days later, moving it only 500 yards. That's not the impulsive act of panic.
No, that's calculated.
That's a calculated staging designed to create a false narrative of proximity. The medical paradox just makes this the least likely theory to explain all the facts.
We've explored the facts and the speculation. Let's provide some grounded analysis on why, even with this renewed commitment from law enforcement, this case is considered so profoundly difficult to solve and why it retains its hold on the public imagination.
I think the crux of the difficulty lies entirely in that central, irresolvable contradiction. The medical examiner's ruling of 24 to 36 hours deceased versus the 5 days missing. This finding is an investigator's biggest roadblock.
How so?
Because it requires them to ignore the simple explanation, death from exposure, and embrace the complex one, a deliberate cover-up involving storage and staging. You are essentially forced to investigate a crime that occurred after the initial disappearance.
And the ruling of instantaneous physiological death, or undetermined, just adds an extreme layer of complication to assigning responsibility.
It does, because without a clear physical mechanism of death, investigators can't pinpoint the exact circumstances leading up to it. If we had a fatal head wound, we could look for a fight. If we had lethal drug levels, we could look at consumption. But without a clear cause, no obvious injury, no fatal BAC, it makes it incredibly difficult to assign clear responsibility or determine the immediate environment of his death.
Did he die from neglect while being restrained? Did he suffer some sudden internal event?
We just don't know. The physiological death ruling leaves that massive gap in the narrative of the where and the how.
And we have to come back to the immense challenge presented by those unreliable, inconsistent witness statements, all compounded by the host's initial definitive lie. The police were trying to build a case on the testimony of people who, from day one, demonstrated a commitment to deception.
That initial lie is just corrosive. Its impact cannot be overstated. It tells the police they cannot trust the people who were last seen with Kurt. If the host lies about the basic fact of the party happening, why would the guests offer a truthful account of what happened when Kurt went outside?
This is where that poor initial police work intersects with criminal intent.
It is. They needed to immediately isolate and interview every single attendee to break that coordinated story, and that simply didn't happen in 1981.
So when you layer the credibility issues of the party guests with the credibility of this external anonymous sources, the warning man, the phone caller, the narrative just becomes an investigative nightmare.
It's a perfect storm of conflicting timelines. The party crowd is minimizing involvement, potentially lying. The father confirms the body wasn't there on Monday. The ME confirms the death was late. And an external source accurately predicted the discovery. It's a mess.
So the logistics of the staging, moving the body 500 yards and placing it in a previously searched area, is that plausible for both partygoers and strangers?
I think so, yes. The question becomes, who was the most motivated? And who had access to the environment that could preserve a body or a person for 4 days?
If the party concealment theory holds up, that means the party guests or someone connected to that duplex had a basement or some space they felt secure using as a holding environment for 4 days. And then they had the incredible confidence or maybe desperation to stage the scene just a few hundred yards away.
The limited distance, only 500 yards, suggests a calculated decision. They weren't trying to hide the body forever. They were trying to stage an accident close to the origin point, hoping that proximity would support the simple narrative. He wandered off, got disoriented, and died of exposure nearby.
If they had moved the body 5 miles away, it would suggest a different level of planning.
A completely different level, more professional. The short distance actually links the crime firmly back to the party location, either by the guests themselves or by someone operating very close to them.
It's important to reflect on the current status of the investigation. Despite the poor initial handling that the police chief acknowledged, there has been a significant positive commitment to seeking the truth.
Yes, there has been. The case was officially reopened in 2019, which was a massive step forward. The Newburgh Heights police are now partnering with Tiffin University's criminal justice program to comb through all the original evidence using modern forensic and investigative techniques.
And that action really validates the enduring belief of the public and the family that someone knows something, that the full truth about those 5 days has yet to emerge.
It shows that law enforcement believes the case is still solvable, and that the answers probably lie somewhere within those original files.
As we look back on missing teen cases from the early 1980s, Kurt Sova's death maintains its haunting grip precisely because of these paradoxical details. It just emphasizes how calculated the concealment had to be to fool investigators for decades. The body was found so incredibly close to the source of the mystery, the party house, yet the essential truth of those missing 5 days remains completely out of reach.
And if the medical examiner's time of death is correct, then the key to solving this is not re-interviewing neighbors about Friday night. It's about discovering which interior space he occupied between Saturday morning and Tuesday afternoon, and who was in control of that space. The answer to this mystery is probably measured in square footage, not square miles.
That brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Given the specific, non-fatal blood alcohol content level of 0.11%, and the ME's determined time of death being late Tuesday or early Wednesday, the most critical piece of missing information isn't how he died, but the exact nature of his confinement. What environment or what conditions over 4 days would leave him with minimal decomposition, yet still result in an instantaneous physiological death that left no clear forensic marker of the cause? Was it medical neglect? Was it some kind of non-traumatic poisoning? Or was it something even more sinister that created a sudden metabolic collapse?
The resolution of this case rests entirely on finding the witnesses who can shed light on that hidden environment and the events of Tuesday night. That's what would allow investigators to finally close the chronological riddle of Kurt Sova's disappearance.
We've explored the threads of truth in the tragic and unsolved case of Kurt Sova, the high school student who vanished for 5 days, only to be found 500 yards away, with a timeline that suggests he was alive until days later.
We hope that the renewed commitment from investigators working through the original evidence with fresh eyes can finally deliver justice and close the gap between the time he vanished and the time his body was placed in that ravine.
Next time on Threads of Truth, the haunting disappearance of Molly Bish, a lifeguard whose tragic story shook an entire community.